Oh, my name is Bob Welsh, and currently I am playing keyboards and guitar with the Fabulous Thunderbirds and Elvin Bishop. And right now, you're listening to Talking Blues.
I want to begin with your grandmother.
Okay.
She was musical. Tell me
Yeah,
a little
yeah.
bit about your grandmother.
Well, she was a fabulous piano player and organ player, and she was playing in churches and silent movie theaters, making sound effects for the trains and everything like that. But she was great, but she died before I started even playing the piano. But she definitely was an influence because there was always music going on in the house.
What kind of music did she play?
She played, she could play boogie woogie, which she rarely did. And she just did show tunes and reading music, Gershwin, Cole Porter, the kind of popular music from her time. I remember hearing that.
I presume you didn't get a chance to watch her work the theater
No,
magic. That would have been way.
that would have been killer. I saw her in church, and she would kick with her feet. She really knew how to play the B3 as well, and she was terrific.
But that's not the reason why you play keyboards.
You know, I I started playing guitar first, and the reason I'm playing keyboards is because Rusty Zinn convinced me to do it. Because he heard me just kind of messing around, and he thought that maybe I had a nice feel on it, and he said if I could learn how to play, that I could join his band on the road, and I wanted to go on the road more than anything. So I learned how to play.
How long did that take for you to play at a level that you could tour with Rusty
About
Zinn?
6 months, I'd say. I just
Wow.
went down to the basement and practiced, and he gave me a tape that had like Big Maceo, Little Brother Montgomery, all the stuff that I hadn't heard before. And he was telling me, okay, learn this, you know, and when he was very gracious to take me on the road because I really could only play in a few keys when I went on the road. It seemed like, but playing live definitely helps your playing, and so does the recording studio. And I just learned pretty quickly.
Okay, so at this point, when you started picking up the piano, you had already started playing, you had already played the bass and the guitar.
Yes,
Were you a good guitar and bassist?
I was a pretty decent guitar player, but I wasn't on Rusty's level by any means at that time. But I was learning from him. I was taking guitar lessons from him, and
And this was your first official guitar lesson, right? Like,
oh, yes, yeah. But I taught myself how to play as a teenager, and I met Rusty when I was like 23, and he gave me about 4 or 5 guitar lessons. And after the last one, he says that I was showing him stuff to play, and that he couldn't teach me anything anymore or something. But
that's why he told you to play the piano.
yeah, exactly. He's like, because I don't want any more competition. I want play some keyboards.
Okay, so if we go back, tell me how. I mean, it sounds like there was music around you all the time when you were growing
Yeah.
up. How did you first get into playing music?
Oh, um, I would say because I was a Beatles fanatic, and I had a guitar that I could barely play. That it was my dad's guitar, and he couldn't play at all. It was a Gibson acoustic guitar, and somebody got me a Beatles book with all the chords in it, and I had an epiphany where to look at the chords and figure out how to play it, and pretty soon I knew just about every Beatles song there was. And then I got into the blues like right after.
How old were you at this point?
14.
Okay, so 14 is pretty early to get into the blues. What do you think it was about the blues that hooked you?
To be honest with you, it was the Blues Brothers movie because I'd
Okay,
never heard it,
I've heard that before.
and seeing John Lee Hooker blew my mind. Like it just sounded so great, you know. And I went out and bought John Lee Hooker records and soon moved on to Muddy Water and Sonny Boy. I mean, I was into it. I was like looking for, reading about what to buy.
Let's say you've kind of figured out how to play chords, Beatles songs. When you
Yeah.
see John Lee Hooker and you go buy John Lee Hooker records, is it easy to figure that out? Can you just listen to it and go, "Oh, that's what he's doing"?
Oh, well, at that point, I was really trying to figure it out, and that's why Rusty helped me so much because I learned what I thought was correct, by rote. And then Rusty learned from Luther Tucker, and he was like, "No, here's how you play the right part." And it took me it's not easy to really play it right because you got to play it with feeling and have all the right tone and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's more than just strumming a chord or
Yeah,
a note.
yeah. It's a lot, yeah. It's different than playing Nowhere Man.
At what point did you think you wanted to pursue music in a serious way?
I I fantasized about it as a teenager, but I didn't really pursue it until my early 20s. And then when I met Rusty and started, you know, playing music for a living, basically, and I just went into it.
Can you
So
share that fantasy as a teenager? What that fantasy would have looked like?
that fantasy would have been like, me playing all my favorite music live. I mean, I used to just sit around and wish I was playing the Beatles songs or the Rolling Stones, and then of course John Lee Hooker and Muddy Waters too. And it was a pretty convoluted fantasy. It just
But would this have taken place in a bar, in a stadium, in a
stadium,
arena?
the stadium, yeah, yeah, for sure.
Okay, and then you lived in New Orleans for a little while. You went back to
Yes,
New Orleans.
I did. I did. I grew up
Tell me
in
about that experience.
I grew up in Louisiana, and I lived there for about 10 years, from the age about 7 to 17, and then I moved back there when I was 21, and I was living in the French Quarter, and I lived in like an apartment complex. The first floor was like a transvestite bar, and the second floor was a voodoo couple with a boa constrictor in the hallway, and then I had the third floor.
And you were the weird one.
Yeah, I was a strange one. But I was just trying to think of, I was romanticizing about, I'm living in Louisiana again. Maybe I can play some music and meet some people. But for one reason or another, I didn't. I mean, I was working as a dishwasher at some point and at an old folks' home. And I was playing music on the street. I mean, I was, for money, I was just playing whatever songs I knew. And
What was that like?
well, it was kind of disheartening because I didn't have the skills of like a New Orleans proper musician. I mean, I was just playing some Robert Johnson stuff, and then I'd play a Beatles song for someone walking by, just hoping that they'd throw $1 into my guitar case. So I didn't really, it wasn't like you'd think it would be, me living in Louisiana, because I didn't start playing in a blues band until I moved back to California and met Rusty. But I formed my own band when I moved back to California, and
And it
it
was
was
definitely blues.
it was definitely blues all the way. Yeah, 100%. I was into like Little Walter, and I was looking for a harmonica player, and yeah, I had even recorded like a demo tape, and was doing like Bill Jennings tunes, and um, it was definitely blues all the way.
So was going on the road to Rusty the first road experience?
It was the second. The first road experience was a woman named E.C. Scott, and she's like a gospel singer from Oakland.
Right.
And only reason I got the gig is because Rusty couldn't do it, so he recommended me.
So Rusty's played a big part in your life
Oh, he has.
and
He's one of
probably
my.
continues to, right?
He still does. I'm going to see him in May. We're doing a recording session in Vienna with this great bass player and piano player named Danny Googles, and he's been just recording his artists from America and from Europe too, and kind of making these killer vintage sounding records. And Rusty's so good at all those guitar parts, and he's got such a great voice. And he just kind of hired me too along the ride. So
So is this a blues or reggae album?
this is blues all the way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, because I did notice that he's on tour playing blues right now, or
He
is going to
is.
be.
He's been working a lot in Europe, and which is I'm really happy for him because Rusty's so good at playing blues as well as reggae. But he's living in Brazil now,
Yeah.
and he can go to Europe for several months and make a bunch of money, and then come back and live in Brazil for the whole year. Pretty much.
And
So
in Brazil, is he doing the reggae thing in Brazil?
I believe he is, but I don't know. He works infrequently there, so I don't know when his last reggae gig was.
Right. Okay, so you go on tour. What's that experience like compared to that fantasy you had as a teenage kid?
It was a lot different. I didn't know any of the guys in the band, and halfway during the tour, we're listening to something on the radio, and it was like some U2 song. And EC Scott's like, "That's how I want you to sound like, like The Edge, And I'm like, I had a Les Paul and a Fender Bassman with a reverb tank, I'm like, I can't sound like that. Sorry, I never got hired again from her.
And then you join Rusty's band as a keyboard player. Tell
Yeah,
me that experience.
well, that was great. But he let me play guitar as well, and it was just exciting playing music I loved, and I always got along great with Rusty. We got along great on the road, and we had Richard Innes playing drums.
One of the greats.
One of the greats, man, and he was great to travel with, a real professional. And but I just remember getting my ass kicked every night on guitar by Rusty, and I learned a lot. He was
Okay, so what's that like? When what does that mean when you're getting your ass kicked, and then what does that feel like?
It feels just kind of like oh man, I just can't play at his level. I'm like, Rusty was so fluent on the guitar, and I was just kind of starting out. And sometimes, I'd be like, oh wow, I think I matched him tonight at least, and it's sounding good. But it took me a long time just to learn how to play, fluently to where it pleases me at least.
I mean, I guess that's part of the learning process, and I presume everybody goes through this.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
But how do
But
you?
I think Rusty was a natural on the guitar right off the bat, from what I hear.
So are you playing leads with him, or are you just playing rhythm?
Both. He was very generous. Let- That's the way to learn, I suppose.
And then when you finish the tour, like what have you walked away with? What did you learn, and how can you quantify that first tour and what you might have walked away with?
I think I might have just figured out what I was practicing at home, what I was able to utilize live, like just making solos work, and how to accompany Rusty. That's what I learned the most thing is I'd be playing piano crazy, and I learned not to play over his vocals when he's singing, so just simple things like being an accompanist. I think I learned, hopefully learned by the first couple of tours.
But is that something that he talks to you and says, you're playing over my singing too much,
Yeah,
or he gives you a
yes,
dirty look
absolutely.
and
He never gave me a dirty look. But he would talk to me and say, "Hey, just play between the vocals." And he also, gave me some good advice. That being among one of them, but he was one of the first guys to on the piano, like, "Hey, just you can play a lot of stuff right now, and just start off slow, and kind of like less is more." And which I still try to keep in my periphery, you know.
Okay, so tell me about that concept because I think I read somewhere about you seeing BB King.
Yeah, yeah. BB King came out and played one note, just went ding, and I was like the best guitar solo I ever heard, you know. It's like meaning that like less is more, because if you play it with feeling, it can be really, it can hit you really hard, as opposed to like a, you know, maybe like a 12-year-old virtuoso who maybe doesn't have the feeling behind
Right.
the playing, you know.
But I just wonder how easy is it to do less is more? You know, to know the idea and go, yeah, I don't need to stick in 12 notes here. But, you know, if you put two, if they're not the right notes, it doesn't mean it's better.
Right. You know, it's, I feel like it's something that I'm still learning. I try to keep that in my head and try to play some, you know, bold, but not just play a bunch of notes, you know. And it's just always, I'm always thinking about it, you know, when I'm playing. So um, I just, some things, you know, you just keep learning.
So you go on to play with a lot of different people, like Elvin Bishop,
Yeah.
like Charlie Musselwhite,
Yep.
Kim Wilson. How does what was the first big break you had? Like, what was the first connection you made with a legend? I guess.
It was with Charlie Musselwhite. And once again, Rusty helped me get that gig because he knew Charlie and he was looking for a keyboard player. And I was in school at the time. I was like thinking about quitting music altogether.
What were you going to school for?
English lit.
With the hopes of
Yeah.
teaching, writing?
I, I was thinking maybe I could be a technical writer, or I didn't know really. I just wanted to finish it. And I only had about, 15 more units to get my bachelor's degree.
Right.
And I'd kind of given up on music. I'd quit Rusty's band, and I wanted to like it, man. I just kind of was just pursuing it and seeing if I could do something else with my life, because um, for whatever reason, being a musician, I wasn't sure if it didn't seem like it was going anywhere.
Must have been, I mean, I can't
And
imagine how difficult that would be to have this dream growing up of being a musician, having had some experience playing with musicians, but not making it really work for you.
yeah, it was tough. I mean, Rusty got on Alligator Records, but they didn't give him a really good advertising or a decent booking agent, and he was struggling out there. And Richard didn't want to tour. The bass player quit and joined Little Charlie and the Nightcats. And I was like, well, shoot, I don't want to be in my 30s and not have anything to show for it. I think I better get a degree and try to, do something different in my life. But then I got the call to audition for Charlie, and I got really excited. And my hope came back, and I was so happy when I got that gig.
So, what is it about? So, at that point, did you think you had, I mean, did you give up music completely or did you still play, practice while you studied?
I was still playing. I was playing with a soul singer named Jackie Payne while I was in college, and I would play on the weekends with him. I was playing keyboards.
And so, were you at this point
So
more
yeah,
of a keyboard player than a guitar player?
it's funny because there's so many guitar players out there. So to this day, I get more keyboard work than anything. The fact that I can do both, keeps me employed. But at that time, they're like, "Oh, Bob plays keyboards. You should hire him." So there weren't that many keyboard players.
And if I was to ask you, when you think of yourself as a musician, do you think of one over the other, or are you just both keyboard and guitar?
I, you know, I feel like I have a greater facility on the guitar, but I have a very great knowledge of Chicago blues piano and other things, but I'm not classically trained. Not on the guitar either, but I think I know just more on the guitar, but I'm learning more on the keyboards still, because I always have to practice for something. So I don't know.
And do you think in terms of one or the other?
I don't.
Like when you hear music, do you hear it as a guitar player or a piano player?
I probably hear it on the guitar, I suppose. But I love both. I love both.
Okay, so you get this gig with Charlie Musselwhite. Tell me what that's like.
That was a lot of fun. I mean, he was a great. He still is a great guy. It was all of a sudden I'm traveling on a bus and you know going playing great festivals and things that I'd never played before, and I got the gig right with Kirk Fletcher, so we were like newbies together, and yeah, June Core in the band and Ratty Bermudez. That was a fun band.
I don't know if I would have seen you. Like I remember seeing Charlie Musselwhite in early 2000, like
Yeah.
2003 or 4 at the Ottawa Blues Festival. Would you have
Mm.
been there? Kirk was there.
Kirk was there. That I must have been there because I joined around 2000, and I think 2003 or 2004 was my last years. But we toured Canada a couple times.
So when you play with somebody like Charlie Musselwhite, what do you learn?
Oh, just bigger audiences. Kind of did a lot of different styles of songs. We had to do like a Cuban kind of beat on one song, and you know, we had to rehearse quite a bit more. I rehearsed with Rusty a fair play too, but I think just it was bigger rooms and a little more pressure somehow. I don't know.
But other than and the time you played with Rusty and thought I'm getting my ass kicked,
Yeah,
like by this time, are you pretty confident of your playing and your abilities?
I'm more confident, but until I got my ass kicked every night by Kirk Fletcher on
But I mean,
no,
they say it's best to be in a band, be the worst player in a band, right?
yeah. But Kirk, boy, I mean, there was a very fluid and great guitar player whom I, think the world of, and I learned a lot. We would talk about music a lot, and he would show me stuff, um, you know, what he listens to and everything. And he's got a very eclectic taste, just like Rusty does. And honestly, to just cut to the chase, I didn't really feel I became a great guitar player until my late 30s, until I joined John Namath's band. That's when I started to really feel like, oh, okay, I'm kind of liking what I'm playing now. And it just took me a while to get it.
Explain that process. Like, what happens when you say, "Wow, I think I have it," or "I think this is where I want to be."
I, I just, I think I would just sit at home and try to practice a lot of my own kind of stuff, and of course I stole a lot from other people too, but I would work on solos and just try to play them note for note, and I just got more fluid, and I was doing the same thing with Rusty, but it just didn't start sounding good to me for some reason until my late 30s, and maybe it's just because I was relaxing. And the guitar is different than the keyboards. I feel like I did have maybe I'm more of a naturally better piano player because it's easier to sound fluid on it. At least for me than
Hmm.
it was the guitar. Yeah.
So, am I correct to assume that you got the John Nemeth gig because Kid Anderson left the band? Is that the way it worked?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe he didn't leave the band, but because you were living at Greaseland, because Kid talked about this on my interview with him, and he got
Yeah. Kid's tenure with John Namath was very short,
right,
and it's kind of like you know lore now. Everybody talks about kids drinking days.
right.
And he after one night in I forget where we were in Washington, Kid managed to break a bathtub and insult the club owner on the same night. So John had had enough.
So, were you
So
already in the band then?
I I was playing bass because Junior Watson was also in the band.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was playing bass and or maybe keyboards. I don't remember. I honestly don't remember. And but I really wanted to play guitar, and I was playing with Mark Hummel, and I joined up with John Namath, and once Kid, and I think John I'd already done some gigs with John on guitar, and I think he liked my playing, so that worked out.
And then you feel comfortable playing guitar.
I did, but John also kind of broke me out of my shyness. I remember one time he put a piece of tape at the end of the stage, and he goes, "This is where I want you to stand when you solo." Like, okay, I just did whatever I wanted to learn, and I got into it. And but yeah, that was a lot of fun playing with John.
What a talent.
Yeah, I know.
So when he says stand here, come up to closer to the front of the stage, how do you feel about that?
I was okay with it. I knew he knew what he was talking about, and I was like, well, he's right. If in order for me to get over in the audience, they're gonna have to. I'm gonna have to like step it up a little bit, I suppose.
And was that an easy transition for you?
At that point I was ready, so it wasn't so difficult. And he was just right. He was right to tell me to stand up to the edge of the stage when you solo, and but he was great to work with. And so yeah, I was just ready for it. I was ready to learn, and I was ready to have fun.
Okay, so I think of you probably associate you with Alvin Bishop more than anybody else. How did that happen?
That happened. I met him on one of those cruises, and he sat in with us, and I think I played piano and guitar with him, and he liked my playing, and he called me up about a year later to see if I could do a tour with him, but I couldn't because I was already committed to John. And but I really liked Elvin. I was always been a fan, and at the end of the year, I thought about it like, well, shoot, if that position's still open, I wonder, I kind of want to work with Elvin and see what that's like. So I called him up and said, hey, man, can I be in your band? And he said, yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
No audition, nothing.
Well,
Obviously, he liked you, right?
he liked
So,
he liked me. I had to show up to his house and sit with him and show that I knew all his songs. And after that, I had the gig. Yeah.
what kind of preparation goes into that?
You know, the previous guitar player, Mike Shermer, who's a great guitar player, he made a tape for me of like, okay, here's all the parts to play behind. Because, Elvin's like a mathematical genius, and he comes up with all these sort of places on the guitar parts you wouldn't even think of. And I wouldn't have had a chance learning them, you know, just by listening to it because I have no idea what he's doing.
Right.
So he was kind enough to show me all his parts, and I learned all the parts that way. And and then like for the rhythm guitar parts, I tried to copy what Mike was doing, and Elvin's like, "No, don't do that," because it wasn't natural. He's like, "Play like you on this thing," and so I had to come up with my own parts as well. And but it just took a couple of days of practice, just practice for hours, and then it was rewarding, because I learned all right.
I remember seeing you guys at the Southside Shuffle. I don't know what year it was because I don't remember any years. But
Yeah.
I mean, it was amazing. It's just you guys were on fire that night. I think it was,
Oh, cool.
I think it might have been raining, but it was just just watching you guys on stage and just thinking, my God, Alvin Bishop was amazing. And I remember seeing you,
Yeah.
like just how I mean, he's obviously been around, but there's just something about witnessing a show that is so powerful that is just, a notch above the rest. It was quite something else.
That's how I always felt about Elvin and his band, because he really is special, and he knows how to build songs, and solos, and he's a great guy,
Yeah, he is.
best band leader I've ever had. Great, great guy.
My favorite thing is about him when I asked him asked to interview him many, many years ago. I went to his record company, and then I got a phone call from him, and it was in Japanese, and my Japanese isn't very good, but this person said Ayumako, and he was speaking in Japanese, and I'm thinking, who is this? Nobody speaks to me in Japanese, and it was Alvin Bishop, and
Oh
because
man.
he had learned how to speak Japanese when he was 50, because somebody said you can't learn anything new when you're 50, and he
Right.
decided he would prove them wrong and learn Japanese, and he spoke way better than I did. So, um,
Oh,
but
well, he can't wait to speak Japanese to somebody who can speak Japanese. So, you know,
well, I would let him down on that one. But so what is it like to? I mean, what's it like to play on stage with somebody who has that command of the stage and who can take the show to the next level? Is that something easy to learn?
no, I just, all the parts were relatively, they weren't easy, but I got through them, but, the one thing I stumbled on was like, Elvin will give you a solo, but it's not like you go up there and you're going to like shred for like 5 minutes. You just get like 12 bars, which is great. I love that. And he said, listen, if you're not feeling inspired, since you only have 12 bars, it's better you come up with a solo that you can rely on and play it note for note should you not be inspired. And so I was like, oh shit, I'm going to come up with my own solos. That's cool. And he taught me that a solo should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. The beginning is something bold you start with to get people's attention, and the middle is something to keep them interested in, and the end is something simple like a turnaround so they remember it. And I was like, oh shit, well, that's a great philosophy. And so I did that, and I was like, wow, this is very rewarding, and that way there's just kind of no room for error on stage. And there's a lot of mistakes going on though anyway. Elvin's funny, man. Like there's a band with trombone player and percussion and drums and piano, and it's hard to keep that all together. Sometimes things go awry.
Right.
And Elvin and I have a lot of two guitar parts worked out. And I think he was like that with all of his bands. He always has these two guitar parts worked out. But if anything goes wrong at any point, it can be a disaster.
But it might be a disaster to you on stage, but to the most of the fan base who are watching, they probably have no idea that it's a disaster, correct?
Probably not. Yeah, probably not. And Elvin's like really professional. He just shrugs it off if anything happens. He knows.
I can imagine. Okay, so the other person you've worked with a lot is Kim Wilson.
Yeah.
How did that happen? How did that begin?
That I met him through Rusty once again because Rusty used to play with. Yeah, I know.
There's a connection
He used
here.
to. Yeah, man. Um, he used to play with Kim in his band. He recorded with him. And I started playing with him back in the '90s, and I got a call to sub for Johnny Moeller on the guitar for the T-Birds back in 2016, just for like 3 gigs.
Okay, so I always find this fascinating. So what is that like to get a call and say, you got to learn these songs. Johnny's not going to be around. Can you be the guitar player?
Yeah, no, I've seen the show. I've always been a fan of the T-Birds, so I was just excited. I was like, shit, I can't wait. And so I practiced and practiced and got them all right and showed up to the gigs. And it was funny because I was playing through two super reverbs. At the end of the gigs, they're like, you're not loud enough. And I'm like, what? Are you kidding? This is the loudest I've ever been in my life. So yeah, it was loud. But we were opening for the Doobie Brothers, so it was their arena kind of.
Right.
It had to be loud. That made sense.
So what's the difference between being the guitar player for Kim's blues band versus being a guitar player and keyboard player for the Fabulous Thunderbirds?
Um, I would say just the songs are different. I mean, the blues band, we're not doing Wrap It Up and Tough Enough and those songs. And I mean, yeah, but in the blues band, we're doing like way more BB King and Magic Sam, a lot of more shuffles and slow blues. It's just Kim loves that stuff, so he doesn't ever want to give up playing it. The T-Birds is a lot different. It's a lot more rocking and faster songs.
But it's also not a set list.
No, not at all. Kim shoots from the hip. You have no idea what he's going to do next, which I really like.
You like because the spontaneity?
It's Yeah, it's spontaneity. It just kind of keeps it fresh. And that's not to say I'm against set lists or anything. I understand that too. But it's just a different way of approaching it.
And are you like, I always wonder, I presume because Kim is who he is and he's been around and he knows the stuff, that him calling out the show as he goes along, like realistically, he's not going to make a mistake and call out a song that was just not a good idea.
Right, right.
Right? Like he knows this audience, he knows how the show should go. But does that ever happen where you think, well, that was a weird choice?
Yeah, well, when I first got in the T-Birds, it was a completely different band. Johnny Moeller wasn't there. I didn't know anybody, and it was all horns. And we had like two sax players and a trombone player, and we're doing like all these old Bobby Bland tunes, and that sounded great. But the horn players were like jazz cats, and they didn't really care for T-Bird songs very much. So like having saxophone and trombone on Tough Enough just didn't sound good. And in my opinion, but I know everything else it sounded fine. So it was kind of like a strange experience because, and then Kim got rid of the horns and got Johnny back in there, and it feels great. It feels like how it should be. I suppose the horns were just, they're great. They're great to have them, but it just didn't work in this routine.
Right.
So that didn't work.
Okay, so when you're up there playing with T-Birds, and I know this was before you officially joined, but opening up for the Doobie Brothers, in essence, this is your dream come true. That teenage kid, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly. It felt that way to me.
That must be something else.
It felt really cool, man. I wasn't sure if I'd ever get to something like that, but I'm really grateful.
And as a member of the T-Birds now, I presume you're experiencing something like that on a more regular basis.
Yeah, most of the places we play have seemed to sell out, and they're big crowds, and they know the songs, and and the rest of the band are just great and easy to get along with. And Kim's a great guy, man, and I like everything about it.
Yeah, and it's their 50th anniversary, right? So this is a big deal with a new album coming out.
Yeah, we got a record coming out, I think, in June, and it's got a bunch of special guests on it, like Bonnie Raitt and Elvin's on it, and Mick Fleetwood and Taj Mahal, Billy Gibbons, I think, and cool songs. We're already starting to play some of them, but we'll see what happens.
So did that change your life to join this band? Like, is it any different to be in the Fabulous Thunderbirds than it would have been playing with Charlie Musselwhite or John Nemeth or Alvin Bishop? I mean, it is a little more rockier.
It is more rockier, and I really like that. I like getting up there and playing the songs we do. And Elvin was the same feeling, I think. He's just doesn't play as much as he used to, and he has every right to be semi-retired and do whatever he wants,
Right.
And playing with Charlie was a lot of fun too. The music, and John, John deserves a bigger crowd, I think. But I mean, he has big crowds, but he deserves everything those guys, have, I think.
I mean, it's a pretty amazing resume you have when you think about those are the people you've played with for a very long time. I mean, starting with Rusty Zinn.
Yeah.
So what is it about you that gets you into these situations and continues to that allows you to continually play with these people?
Well, I think playing both keyboard and guitar definitely helps, because people think, oh, I get two in one.
Right.
Um, but Kim and Elvin have both complimented me on my accompanying abilities. So I think starting with Rusty, I learned how to accompany a singer in this genre of music very well, you know, on the piano and the guitar. So I think in the studio and on stage. It took me a long time, but I got there. So I think that's what keeps me busy.
Do you know? I know that everybody picks up an instrument, and the goal is to hopefully one day sound like themselves, to have their
Yeah.
own sound. And in your case, as a sideman, you have to basically accompany all these great musicians. Was it difficult to attain that sound of yours, playing with so many different people?
Right off the bat, I've always kind of had my own sound, and I'm not trying to brag. As a matter of fact, it's because I can't mimic other people very well. So I always end up sounding like me. And I've practiced BB King solos and Otis Rush, and I just always end up playing the way I do. And I think I kind of, you know, at least I feel like I have kind of my own sound, but that's just because I'm not able to imitate other people in a way that I would like to.
Okay, and then the other thing that you've been working on, and I don't know where it's at, but is a solo recording.
Yeah, yeah,
Tell me about
exactly.
that.
Well, many years ago, I went into the recording studio. I think it was probably 4 or 5 years ago, and I cut a bunch of songs at Greaseland Studios where I used to live.
Right.
And I had Kid playing bass on it. He's a fantastic bass player. And I had Marty Dodson playing drums, and I had June Core on drums, and then I had Alabama Mike singing on it. And we recorded a bunch of songs, and after listening to it, like shit, some of this sounds pretty good, you know. And it's just so strange putting out an album these days, since I do consider myself more of a sideman than I do. I don't really sing.
I mean, what made you start that project? What made you think I need to do this?
Probably just wishing that I had something to sell on stage, uh, and also to create like I've always wanted to have a 45. I remember when John Namath made a 45 of one of his songs on one of the records I did with him, and I thought, oh, this is the coolest thing, because I love vinyl.
Right.
So I want to have it for aesthetic reasons as well. I like I'd like to have at least a 45 or an EP of maybe the songs I've done, and I've got really 8 good ones. I think we recorded like 12, but the other ones I don't know so much about. Um, and then I did a bunch of recording with John Atkinson, and I'm hoping he maybe might give me a couple of those songs from his sessions, and I can put a full record out. If it was cohesive enough. I don't know. I'm not putting it out to promote myself, or I just want to put it out just to have something I can sell on stage, but also, a collection of songs that I like that I think, people might enjoy listening to. I hope.
And are these your own songs or are they covers?
They're all covers. I do like Universal Rock by Earl Hooker. I love that instrumental. I've been doing it for years. And but that's the other reason why it doesn't have enough piano songs on it. So I need to record some piano songs on there. People might be disappointed. There's always recordings.
I mean, the fact that you lived in Greaseland and you work closely with Kid, I mean, you do have
Yeah,
access to a studio.
yeah. I'm still only a half an hour away, and he's very kind to let me. I overdubbed a guitar part on the latest uh, Fabulous Thunderbirds record over there, And kid's busy all the time.
Yeah.
He's always got something going on. But it's great to know that he's over there.
How about writing? Has the idea of writing songs ever intrigued you?
You know, it used to, and I just got so caught up with doing what I do that I've co-written songs with Rusty
Of
and
course.
Elvin. Um, but I love coming up with guitar parts, but completing songs is not something that I have really ever done, on my own. Although I don't know if it's something I will ever do, but maybe.
Well, you've been so busy. Like it's
Yeah,
crazy when you thought that at one point that you would give up this business
yeah,
and become an English lit person,
yeah. Tell me about it.
and then to score a gig with one of the greats, Charlie Musselwhite. And I'm not sure if since then you've ever considered quitting music, but it seems like you've had a pretty good run.
I haven't. I've still had a good run, to this day, and I just, there's nothing really else I can do, and I have no interest in going back to school. And I'm, I still have a musical journey ahead of me. I hope so.
Do you have goals at this point, musically?
You know, I'm just really want to play music live for the rest of my life. That's my goal. I want to just play with people that I like playing with and play for a big audience. I don't know if I have goals or not. Just to keep doing what I'm doing and doing it better. That's pretty much it. I still practice. I'm still serious about what I do, and I just want to keep being able to do it as long as I live.
Well, I think that's
That's
probably a good spot to end this. But
okay.
sorry, but how do you get better? Like, how does that happen?
I think trial by fire. Going out there and playing live and failing, and learning from your mistakes and practicing. And then once eventually you're hopefully feel like you're doing something right up there. And I think that's the only way to learn, playing live.
I mean, I don't even know what that concept of failing would be in context of what you do. Does that even
Maybe
happen anymore?
I think there's a lot of soloing in blues,
Yeah, yeah.
and not all of it you might want to hear. not, I'm, I'm speaking for myself, but not just everybody else. But I mean, like, it's it's a difficult thing. It's to get up there and intrigue people with what you're playing, and you're your own worst critic, But it takes a lot of factors to get it right. And as far as failing, it's just not meeting up to your standards, or maybe not translating well, or who knows. It's I take what I do seriously, and so does everybody else, I'm sure. But I mean, I think practice makes perfect, and playing live is key. And I love what I do, so I'm very grateful.
Well, we're grateful that you do what you do because you've been doing this for a long time and putting out some great music with some great musicians.
I'm very happy about the company I keep.
And you should be. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for doing this, Bob. It was a real pleasure
Hey,
meeting you.
nice pleasure meeting you. And I'm like you say, we probably met at the Silver Dollar
Yeah.
in Toronto, and but it was a pleasure talking to you, man. Thanks for interviewing me.
And I'm hoping. I heard rumors that you might be coming this way in the summer, so I'm hoping that is true, and maybe I will see you.
I hope so. I'll let you know. I'll let you know if we're playing in anywhere near you. And I know we're going to Canada in October. I'll keep you in the loop.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you again for doing this. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, man. Thank you.
You take care.
All right, you too.